on Twitch before you go live. It takes a second.
Oh yeah.
And I'm never quite sure when it activates, even though I have the delay compressed, but we'll just
Okay.
give it a
For
chance
me,
to
it now
catch up here.
activates. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. And you probably get an ad. So while your Twitch ad may have just finished, everyone who's watching. Hi, Karina here from Game Dev Cafe. I'm actually on the line right now with Jeroen Wimmers. He is the developer of the lovely game Circles, which you can probably see in my window right now. I'm going to go ahead and activate some of the music from the game because it's kind of moody and cool. Jeroen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Hi, Karina.
Hi. So this is something new that we're doing for the Game Dev Cafe. I appreciate you joining us. You're one of our first game devs that we've talked to live in stream.
Awesome.
Yeah, we, as you know, streamed your game Circles last week. I know you had a chance to check out the stream, but it was, it was a fun and relaxing game, but it was also a game that brought up a lot of questions because it's really unique. It's a little out of the box. So I'm really happy that we're able to talk to you today. I guess before we even get started, do you mind telling us just a little bit about who you are and where you do game development? Because you're not from North America, which is even more interesting.
No, so first I am from the Netherlands. And here I followed education or study for game design.
Oh, cool.
So it was like game design and development. You learn a bit of design and development and working in teams. And that way I got started. Well, I made some games. I also made some games before that in the Flash era.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that's sort of what I was coming from. Those are a lot of games I played which were Flash games, and which is not a coincidence that the game I made is actually also a Flash game.
I was gonna say it's not not deviating, although this is pretty sophisticated, not compared to the Flash games of old.
True. Yeah, but you can do a lot more with Flash. And so during my study, I also just developed in Flash, and we made another game that's like even more it's super complicated. It was called Westerado. And
cool.
This is how I really got started, you could say, professionally in the game industry. And so after that I finished education, had some interest of my own, of course, what kind of games I wanted to make. And essentially this is exactly what I wanted to make, what you're playing now, Circles. So I took about 2 years then and just worked my ass off to make this game.
I was gonna say, and you finally achieved it. 2 years doesn't even seem like a long time considering the uniqueness of this game. But how do you describe it to people, or what sort of the pitch that you use when you're trying to tell people about Circles?
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of funny because in the beginning I would really think about like what are the right words and how could I describe it well, and I had quite a big story about it, but it's just not describable, the game. It's so hard. I always admire press people who write about it because it's so difficult. You're just talking about circles from here and there, and then you avoid the other ones and catch one. It's kind of weird to talk about. So over time I just had a less to pitch, like a smaller pitch, and in the end I just say go play. I'm not saying anything. And
yes.
Then at conferences, like, people can just play and then they'll get it.
Yeah, it's one of those games that doesn't require a lot of explanation. Like it actually does itself a great service if you just jump in, which is not easy to create. I guess, is that something that you had always intended for this game, or did it start as something different than how it turned out?
No, it started as something really similar, actually.
Oh.
Like maybe a bit too similar, because it seems like there were no changes over time, but it started with just the same levels in the beginning you have played, but most of the changes over time were just really subtle and really like small things to make it more intuitive and easy to understand.
Interesting. And I think the game probably does itself a service by being direct and simple in its focus that way. If you have a good concept, then, as you say, spend time making the concept feel great than complicating it.
Exactly. For me, I was also like, I'm a solo developer, so I didn't want to make it big. So
Yeah.
from the beginning, I had like a few goals or a few limits actually, just to keep it really simple, to focus on experimentation for the player, and then just to only have circles and no text, all these limitations. But in the end, that worked out really well.
Well, it certainly localizes well. I mean, not that,
Oh yeah.
the Netherlands and North America aren't so distant and far apart in terms of their game communities, but have you gotten a lot of global interest in the game? I know, it's been out for a little while, so I'm wondering how large of the audience, comes from places that maybe don't speak English or wouldn't depend on, your own native language.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Or because there is not a single word, so essentially anyone can play it. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the players who are not English speaking are actually Chinese.
Oh,
I think about a quarter of all the players are Chinese players.
interesting.
So that's quite a bit, yeah.
Now, did you promote it in China specifically, or did that just happen organically for
Yeah,
whatever
it
reason?
just happened. There were some people mailing me asking for keys, pretending or well, saying they were journalists and they were Chinese. So I handed a few over, but I never knew if it was legit or not. But maybe some of it was legit.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, as a developer who's solo, I guess it's sometimes worth the risk to get that kind of exposure.
Yeah.
Was this a game that you created? I mean, I know that you created on your own over a few years, but did you create it for the purposes of going to a certain event or showing it at a certain festival? Or did you just start shopping it around to friends? I mean, how did you first get this game out there? Considering people kind of have to try it to understand it.
Yeah, so I did do a lot of festivals because yeah, you need to play it to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of got kickstarted with experimental gameplay workshop
Okay,
in
interesting.
GDC. Yeah. So
I'm very familiar with the GW.
are
Our
you?
studio was there this year too. Yeah, we took a game
Oh
there.
yeah, last year. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I was in the year before that.
Oh,
I
very
did
cool.
my little talk, and so that started my adventure sort of. And actually, in the previous stream, you mentioned you were the IGF judge,
That's right. This is how I got exposed to this game. It was
Yeah.
part of the IGF judging. I'm trying to think if they had categories for this. I don't think so. I think I was just allowed to pick from any games at all. And so, in that sense, it interested me enough just from the name and from the description for me to want to try it. But yeah, the IGF this year had, I think, 400 and something games to pick from, and this was the one that stood out to me personally. So I was really glad to be able to talk to you about it.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Yeah, so in the end I didn't get selected because there were so many great games. But so it's maybe even better that I got selected for the experimental gameplay workshop. So it all worked out in the end.
Interesting. Now, I think, one of the things that I mentioned on the first stream was the game kind of seems easy at first. It seems like you're figuring it out, and suddenly you start to mix in elements of speed and sort of directional motion and a lot of controls that go beyond just sort of putting the circle in the right place, but actually moving it in a certain way to get to that destination. How much testing went into this game? It seems like there's so much motion involved and small movement tracking. It just seems so complex. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was actually a lot more work than I expected. Because the first world that you played in the stream, this was sort of the basics, and you, as a player, you need to understand those. That's just really hard to get right, because if they don't understand one little thing and they continue somehow, it's just gonna mess up the whole experience, because there's no pop-up that's gonna tell you did something wrong.
That's right, yeah.
So a lot of, like, from the first week of the prototype, I tested it, and just every little change just had some new I tested it again at my school where I was at the time, or at festivals. So that was really the guiding factor, really.
Interesting.
See how people reacted.
Now, I gather when you were doing testing, not all the feedback would have been positive. Was there ever a point where this game didn't feel right to you, or were you fairly confident throughout the development process that, it was moving in the right direction? And obviously bugs and glitches aside, that you were eventually
Yeah.
going to get to this really nice final product.
Yeah, so there were a lot of bugs and glitches, which you wouldn't expect, but it was still something pretty complicated. But there were some points where I was sort of doubting the game, because in the beginning, it's of course there were a lot of times where people just got stuck, or especially they kept dying without noticing. They touched the circle and essentially died.
That's a good point.
So
That actually happened to me on the stream. I don't know if you saw,
yeah,
but I didn't quite understand that I was dying. It's such a non-jarring experience that you're like, oh wait, oh that's what's happening.
yeah. So that was
Interesting.
sort of a fine line to walk, because before, when you touch the circle and you die, all the circles would just pop back in. So it was a really big change, and then it was also obvious something happened, and then you go back to the beginning. But it actually, in the end, that was really frustrating, because like a lot of things happened from one like negative action, touching a circle, and it was just like it's the same thing. It would be the same thing as changing the background all the time. It's just really taxing for the player. Like a lot of feedback happens. So right now it's a small change, just circles change into rings. But still, it's a bit more subtle, so people can just replay it without really feeling that they've done something terribly wrong.
Yeah, I do like how the game doesn't really scold you. It's even when you do get stuck, it's actually more pleasant than I think most games are. It's a game that really encourages you to keep trying, which I think is what I like so much about it. Even while we're chatting just now, I know you're not able to see a sort of live feed, but I've gotten stuck in a few places, and it's not a game that you ever really want to rage quit on. It's like
I'm
the
glad.
perfect balance. Yeah, it's just the perfect balance of challenge and feedback to the player. So I guess, in terms of being a solo developer and sort of other developers trying to create this type of project on their own, do you feel that you are sort of, I guess, a success at this point, or is there some measure that you're using to determine whether the game is successful? Because obviously you've created something really unique and recognized, as sort of a great game. But as a developer who's working on his own, what do you measure as success?
Well, let me first respond to what you said earlier, right? About there's one thing I wanted to say about difficulty, and then I'll respond to the success, because I think that's also one thing that kept coming up, like if that was too difficult, and a lot of games, of course, work like that. They're difficult, and that's why they're fun. And with this game, I didn't really want it to make the difficulty be the factor that makes it fun, but just the discovering and the learning. So it doesn't really matter if it's that difficult. It matters if you are learning things and if you are enjoying the gameplay itself. So it was kind of I also had some mechanics to just completely remove the fact that you could die, because that's not the interesting part about the game.
Right.
And I feel
exactly.
a lot of games make themselves interesting because you have to do certain things, and when you can't do them right, you get punished and it's difficult. And I don't think I think there's more gameplay just to get from difficulty. But yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So the game isn't really that difficult in the end, and some people find that weird for a puzzle game, because puzzle games are always sort of graded via difficulty.
Right.
This is more graded by all the elements you learn and experiment, and that's sort of the feeling that makes it a quality game.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's and again, it's not a game where anyone would ever be so intimidated by the puzzles that they'd walk away. So maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, like maybe puzzle games need to be a little easier.
Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of a weird puzzle game in that sense. It's not about, I think, solving the puzzles, but experimenting with them and sort of learning about them. And there's even cases where you figure out a puzzle and you don't even know how you did it. Maybe you had some instances of that.
Yeah, a few, and then you almost wish you had seen what happened, because you're like, I know I'm probably going to have to use that mechanic again. I mean,
Yeah.
it's certainly in that sense, it really feels like a successful experience in terms of a game. So it's not, again, it's a nice balance of easy and soft, but it's a pleasant experience. The sound and the movement work well together, and as you said, you went through enough testing to make sure that the player experience was going to be sort of not just intuitive, but also interesting and engaging. So it's a
Yeah.
constant experiment.
Yeah, and also as a last side note, for people who do want some difficulty, there are some modes in the bottom. I think you unlocked one of them, and when I don't think you've really seen it yet, but in the bottom you have a little circle,
I see
and then
that.
if you click that one, you get a whole new experience, and that's really, if you want more of it, you can do it like that.
Oh, that's really
Ah.
exciting. Okay, I just had to try it. Oh,
Yeah.
neat.
So there's 4 of those, of all kinds of modifiers.
Oh, fun.
So that's really the difficulty aspect coming up.
This is why I wanted to talk to the developer. See?
Yeah, the secrets.
Secrets. It's actually it's something that I probably would have discovered eventually, but it's so small and minimal, like the entire game. That's really charming. I love it.
Yeah, I watched the stream, and just when it popped up, normally people just see something happen, but you just stop the stream, and I was like, no, you just had this extra thing. Oh yeah, there you go.
I had just discovered it. Oh, that's funny. Well, we certainly intend to stream this game again, even after talking to you. It's a really nice sort of chill out game, and that's something that, as you say, not all video games have that component. At least not puzzle games.
No. Okay, but to get back to the success question, I guess.
Yes. So are you successful at this point, or is this a game a success in terms of how you've defined it?
Yeah, the latter. Is definitely a success for what I wanted to create and what I wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, it is a game that every feature I wanted to be in there is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that kind of maybe took a bit of time, a bit too long, but I'm happy I had the chance to do that. And it really turned into a game that I think is really accessible, which was a big goal. Like anyone can play it. It doesn't matter what language or what age or experience with games you have.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, that's what I wanted to achieve, and I think that worked out. But on the other hand, it is in the end it is a game that's kind of unfamiliar to a lot of people because it's just circles, and you may see a trailer or a small GIF. And it's just you have no idea what's happening. so that, and it turned out to be a really hard sell because it's just difficult to sell a game that you have to play.
It's so abstract. Yeah. No, I totally understand. It does present as a very polished game, though, in terms of a package when you are selling it. In terms of the audio, is that something that you had a lot of help with as well?
Yeah, definitely. That's the one thing I couldn't do.
And I know you took on marketing on your own. You did the development on your own. You did the shows on your own. But yeah, the audio is I think we talked about it in the stream before, but it's really complementary to what's going on, and it also works in almost any configuration, which is, I imagine, quite hard to achieve.
Yeah, so it definitely took some iterations to get a system working for every level in the game. So you don't have to tweak anything in a level to make the sound work. Just the sound works for any configuration. Yeah, for circles. And so this took some different forms. And in the beginning, it was easy to think of a system where just one or every circle has a certain sound emitter. And then when you get closer, you can hear it, or other variables change things. But it was just a huge mess of 20 sounds playing, and I tried
over
to balance some things. Yeah. And so in the end, I was kind of out of ideas. And also working with an audio designer that in the end didn't make it for the final game, but he helped me early on.
Oh, nice.
And actually he had at some point he had an idea saying like, what if you could like play one track and then determine the volume based on all the other circles.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was a really bad idea. But the good thing about bad IDs, I guess, is that they're new IDs. So it wasn't something I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, I wanna let people recognize certain sounds and certain circles, so they know a certain circle, a certain sound comes from a circle, and they know to move fast or slow. So
Right.
to have one sound for all the circles was a bit weird. But as you've maybe noticed right now, there are only a few layers per circle type, really.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have, let me see, a few levels after this, you have, for example, one circle that gets small when you go fast, and one that goes small when you go slow. So that's 2 kind of circles. And both of them will have a track, and each track will see, just based on all the circles of that certain type, it will determine its volume.
Interesting.
So in the end, that worked out really well. So in most of levels, you only have a few circle types responding on certain movements. So those tracks just fade in and out based on what you do. And yeah, it worked really well.
It's also subtle enough that it's not what's the word? I guess it doesn't feel repetitive or redundant, even though it is basically a repeated sound. There's a few games where they have so many auditory cues that are helpful, but after a while you kind of don't want to hear them, even though even though they may be telling you to do something really important. And this game, you know, I've played it for hours at this point. Still haven't gotten tired of the sounds, and there's always something that's sort of unique about it. So yeah, the reaction between the mouse and the circles and the sounds is all very it feels fresh every time, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's good. So it wasn't always like that. So there was at one point we figured out certain sounds were better than others. Mm-hmm. So we had, for example, some melodies going on. When you move, the melody would fade in or out. But of course, a melody is really recognizable, and you just hear it looping and looping over and over. Mm-hmm. So all the sounds, the circle sounds you hear right now, are just constant. Oh, you almost got it.
Oh, so close.
Oh yeah, all the sounds are just constant sounds playing based on volume, and that works way better. You can't really recognize it looping.
That's a good point. Yeah, it does make it feel very different each time you hear it. So I guess, you know, in terms of developing this kind of game, I know it took you a few years, and it's done in Flash. Is there anything that you had to develop on your own, or was it done essentially using existing tools and just assembled in a creative way?
Yeah, so I just used tools to help me. There's this one editor called Ogmo editor, and it's something I think only Flash people use. Mm-hmm. And it's really versatile. Like, we also made the first Westerado game from like 4 years ago or something. We also made that in the Ogmo editor, the levels. So you can really make any game or make any level in there.
Interesting.
But apart from that, I didn't really need any tools.
Now, obviously, it's out on PC and people can play it now. I know it's going to be available in a couple bundles coming up, and you're having a Steam sale. But in the interim, you know, I was willing to check the game out quickly. I would certainly take a look. If people have any questions for you, where's a good place to reach you?
You can reach me on Twitter at my name Jeroen Wimmers, so at Jeroen Wimmers.
Oh, was I saying that wrong? Am I saying it like a North American?
It's a really difficult name for non-Dutch people. But normally I just introduce myself as Jerome.
Oh, okay.
And that's a bit easier, so that's also fine.
Jeroen, very cool. And I guess, you know, finally, if people sort of are into checking out this game in the meantime, one of the things that I was really curious about when I was playing is whether there's a point at which you beat it. So you mentioned that it's not a difficult game. I imagine that in that sense there is an end point. Is this a game that you intend to release additional versions of? Is this something that could go beyond the end of the game version that exists now?
Oh yeah, there's still some ideas for extra levels, because that's the main content which I could extend on. But for now, the game is pretty much a complete package. It has some like 90 levels, which is a good amount.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and as you've seen, like this is one mode, and you can play all the levels again, and you've got 4 of those modes, so there's still quite some playing time. So for now, I'm just keeping it like that. I think it's good.
Excellent.
And you have an ending after that, which is also pretty nice.
A very rewarding ending. Yeah. Even the end of every level where you get to gather up the circles feels like very, accomplished driven. So this level is giving me a lot of trouble, but the nice thing about it is, well, I really like how once you understand what needs to happen, you kind of are motivated to keep trying. Like once you figure out the key, you want to use it, which is I think the best thing about this game. But in the meantime, just trying to think of any other questions that we have about the game directly. I do have some questions for you, of course. Now, aside from circles aside from circles and obviously taking this game as far as you can take it, are you working on any other upcoming projects?
For now, nothing noticeable or nothing too big.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just, I am really experimenting a bit with mobile.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And HTML5 and just everything, learning a bit extra programming languages to get a game on there.
Interesting.
And after that, I'm also continuing to make this game for mobile because it also is suitable for touch.
Excellent. Well, that was going to be my next question, is whether it could be turned into a tablet game or basically something other than a PC game because, well, as you know, Switch and a few other consoles are sort of experimenting with indie developers, so it would be nice to see this game get out to an even broader audience.
Yes, so it will definitely get on mobile. It just needs a bit of touches in the design department because your finger is really big and you have this tiny cursor going on the screen, so I'll need. Oh, you got. So I'm still following you play.
So close.
Okay.
See, and it doesn't make a bad spectator game either. But no, I imagine there's a lot of challenges associated with mobile, even just, as you say, sort of in terms of accessibility and functionality control. I guess, for the last question here, I would ask if you have any advice to other developers who are working on a project like this, something that might be a little out of the box or a little hard to define. Definitely a great idea, and certainly once it's down, it looks wonderful and it plays well. But do you have advice for other developers who might be working on something that just isn't that easy to sell? 2 years is a long time to spend on one project, so clearly something drove you to do it. Was it just having a great idea, or is there something else to it?
Well, first off, I was just in a really lucky position that I had resources to do this, because I don't think many indie developers can do that. And I had the luck that before this I finished Questorado, which did really well. So I imagine it's really hard to just do this for 2 years and not be too dependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
But for one, what helped me all the way is just a lot of going to conferences and figuring out what other devs think about the game, how I can improve it, and even getting feedback from parents who play along or girlfriends who don't really want to play games but come to your game and instantly get it,
Yeah.
And those were nice reminders of really what I wanted to achieve. Like I wanted to make an accessible game. And it was nice to see it come back like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I guess in the meantime, while we wait for you to develop something else that's wonderful and amazing, we'll just say that this game is a great example of perseverance, sure, opportunity, but also sort of sticking with a great idea, a simple, great idea, and I guess fulfilling that concept to its fullest. Because I really feel like this is an example of a game that should be made. That was basically my feedback to the IGF. Spoilers. I think I'm allowed to share my judgments now, but no, I think this is the kind of game that, again, sort of opens up gaming to more people. As you said, it's highly accessible. It's rather easy and pleasant to play, and at the same time, it's very different from what else is out there.
And
so
there was one thing you brought up in your previous video that I thought was really interesting. And at some point you described the game or the gameplay as being a dance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really apt, or really a good thing, how to define it.
It's like you're dancing with
Yeah.
your mouse, I think, is the way I
It's sort
described
of.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. So
definitely
I was happy to hear that.
movement. Yeah, it's so movement oriented. Actually, that's something around accessibility that might be interesting too. The game, in many ways, almost feels therapeutic, and I wonder if
Hmm.
there's therapeutic applications there, even for dexterity control. And I mean, it almost feels like exercise in a way. Not just
Yeah.
like brain exercise as a puzzle game, but yeah, exercise in terms of how do you use and manipulate an input control, which could really
Yeah.
be
Because
anything, right?
the game isn't really how do you call that? There's not really a conflict between you and the game. It's sort of like you're working together to get to the end. And I
Exactly.
think I had some people playing that actually had brain damage
Mhm.
at a conference. So
Mhm.
they had trouble focusing, or trouble, just doing certain movements also.
Mhm.
But for them, playing this game and actually figuring out the patterns and taking it at their own pace really helped them out. So that was
Interesting.
really cool to see, because you can just play it on your own pace. Like, the game doesn't throw any enemies at you. You don't have to respond to sudden events.
That's right.
That really, yeah, in a way, that really helps out.
It's less panicked, I think, than a lot of other video game experiences,
Yeah, yeah.
which is maybe why I find it such a nice break. That's certainly why I've returned to it a few times in between other games. So, excellent. No, that's really cool to hear. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us. I guess as a final note, is there anything that you want people to make sure that they understand about this game, or anything that we didn't get to that you want to make sure that the audience knows from the developer?
Oh yeah. So I was talking about the game being hard to show what it is.
Mhm.
So something like this helps a lot, of course, to see someone play and to get a bit of explanation.
Yeah, just to show
But
it.
yeah, so I'm glad you gave me the opportunity for this. But if people want to play for themselves, there's also a demo online, because it is made in Flash and you can just play it in your browser.
Excellent.
So at circlesgame.com, people can check it out, and they can just drop in if they're on PC at least.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure
Yeah.
that we get the links up as well. And I know you're going to be having a Steam sale on May 11th, so that's something that people
Right.
can look for if they want to purchase the full version of the game. It's definitely, as I said, something that I keep returning to, so I think well worth adding to your library. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was really fascinating to hear about your process. I know we'll chat with you a little bit further on GameDevCafe.com, so for anyone who might be tuning in or watching this on video later, we do get to know a game dev interviews, and we're definitely going to be featuring the game dev behind this game, Circles, Jeroen. Jeroen, I'm going to try to say it.
Yeah, it's good. It's
Wimmers.
good.
Yay! I'll learn. We're Canadian, so I have no excuse. We're supposed to know all languages here. Anyways, thanks again so much for chatting with us. And
Thank you too very much. It was fun.
and we'll see the rest of you guys soon. I'm going to continue playing a little bit of Circles on my own, and we'll let you know when we're going to do another stream for this game, probably
Cool.
sometime next week.
Okay.
All right.
Check out the other modes, I'd say. There's
Yes.
a lot more.
I was going to say I have some exploring to do, especially now that I'm starting to unlock them and get a handle on it. So wonderful. All right. For those of you guys tuning in on Twitch, we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.